On the morning of April 25th, 2007, in the city of Heilbronn in southwest Germany, two police officers were having their lunch in their car when unexpectedly two people entered the back seat. These two people began to open fire and shot both police officers in the back, killing one and injuring another. The police officer that was killed was 22-year-old Michelle Keiswetter. She was sitting next to another police officer named Martin Arnold. He survived the attack but was severely injured. He entered a coma for 3 weeks, and upon waking up, he had no recollection of the crime itself and only remembered the events prior to the attack. The two police officers were attacked from behind with no clear motive of why they would be attacked. And given this, the residents of Heilbronn were very, very fearful of who these individuals were, where they were, and what they were going to do next. The police did not really have a clue of why someone would attack two police officers randomly, for apparently no reason. But upon investigating, they were able to find two traces of DNA. One on the back of the seat, and one in the center console of the car. So when the DNA was brought back to the lab and they got the results, this is where there were some surprises. Because the DNA for one belonged to a woman. And typically these type of violent crimes, it's almost always men. So they had the profile of a woman, and that was about it. But what was even stranger is they were able to link the DNA to a crime that happened all the way back in 1993. This was a cold case of another murder that happened. Now this case was the murder of a 62-year-old woman, also in Germany. She had been strangled with a wire in her living room, and this individual that did that also left behind DNA on a teacup. So strangely, the DNA from this cop killing matched another brutal murder from 1993. So now the police had the profile of a woman who's potentially killed two people. And then from there, it got even stranger, because they were able to link the DNA to another crime that happened, another murder. This was another cold case that happened in 2001. This was the murder of a man who ran an antique shop, and he was also strangled with a wire. So these two crimes matched, and now they had potentially a serial killer over multiple decades that they had the DNA of. In these two murders, there was also not a clear motive of why they happened. There was only small amounts of money taken, so it did not seem like a robbery. So that was similar to the event that happened in Heilbronn because there was no real motive there. They did take their guns and handcuffs, but that wasn't really a reason why it happened. It was clear it was not a robbery. So now the police had the profile of a female serial killer who had killed people over multiple decades. The suspect was given a nickname, the Woman Without a Face, or the Phantom of Heilbronn. So now the police continued their search for this alleged woman who committed these three murders and an attempted murder. But the thing is, the case kept on getting stranger and stranger, because as time went on, there were more DNA matches that were coming up left and right. And let me just go through the list here of some of the associated crimes where the DNA showed up, which is quite long, so bear with me. So in 2001, they found the DNA on a syringe containing heroin that a child had stepped on. So now the profile expanded more. They had a potential drug addict woman who killed people. The DNA was also found on a cookie in a trailer that had been broken into, also in Germany. I don't know what's with this individual, but apparently crimes make them hungry because they had a big bite out of the cookie, and then at the other murder, they had a cup of tea. So I don't know, they're just a hungry criminal, I guess. It was also found on a toy pistol after a 2004 robbery of a Vietnamese gemstone trader in France. So now they have crimes in Germany and France. So now the profile of this killer was getting very confusing, because they had what they thought was a woman heroin addict, cop killer, who breaks and enters, and also robs jewelry stores with toy pistols. So they were a little confused, to say the least. And the DNA just kept on showing up at more and more associated crimes. So let me just go through a couple here. They found the DNA on a stone that had been thrown through a window for a burglary in 2006 in Germany. Also, they found it at another burglary in 2007 at an optometrist store in Austria. So now it's Austria, France, and Germany. Then continuing on, they linked it to 20 burglaries and thefts of cars and motorbikes between 2003 and 2007 in Germany and Austria. The DNA was then found on a car that was used to transport the bodies of 3 Georgians that had been killed in 2008. Now, if this wasn't weird enough, there was an eyewitness to one of these robberies that happened. And when the police asked the suspect what the criminal looked like, they said they looked like a man. So this was extremely confusing for the police. But they came to the conclusion, potentially, their suspect was a trans man. So now let me go over the entire profile that they have of this suspect. It's a woman who transitioned to a man who's a cop killer, who does heroin, breaks into houses, kills people, robs stores with toy guns, robs houses, and kills 3 Georgians for some reason. So the police are looking all over for this phantom of a criminal who's just appearing all over Europe. And when they question other people who were associated with the crimes, they would not budge and give up who the person was. So the police were really at a loss. This phantom of Heilbronn had been evading them, and there was nothing they could do. They were just committing crimes all over Europe, and they really weren't getting closer on finding who it was. But there was something that was about to break the case wide open. In 2009, the police were investigating the death of a man who had died in a fire. This person was an asylum seeker, and they already had their DNA in the system. But when the police tested the DNA of the body, it matched the phantom of Heilbronn. And at this point, the police realized this couldn't be possible. We know this guy, we know his DNA. How is it matching this criminal that's doing all these other crimes? They then retested the DNA of the body, and the phantom's DNA was no longer there. So now they knew something was really up. And the police came to the conclusion that there was no phantom of Heilbronn. The police realized they were getting false positives when taking these DNA tests, and their theory of why was because these swabs were contaminated. So the entire time they thought they were looking for a murderer, this phantom of Heilbronn, this woman without a face, it was actually a woman who worked at the factory that made the cotton swabs that went in the DNA kits. It was the DNA of a 71-year-old Polish factory worker. Some sweet old grandma. Not some absolute psycho committing crimes all over Europe. And basically with that, they realized they were chasing someone who didn't really exist. The phantom was literally a phantom. She did not exist at all. These were all different criminals committing these crimes, and just the cotton swab that was used to take the DNA was contaminated in every single one of these cases from the specific factory where they made these cotton swabs. So obviously after this, regulation was put into place for exactly what type of cotton swab they could use in DNA kits, and that obviously couldn't be contaminated. So now coming all the way around, you might be wondering, who did shoot up those police officers? Later in the investigation, they are able to find out that the suspects were actually 2 neo-Nazi terrorists. So definitely not this mysterious phantom. And that's it. That's the summary of the Phantom of Heilbronn, or the Woman Without a Face. Thank you for watching.